So with that, I'll introduce Vui. She's a software engineer with over 20 years experience across many tech stacks. She's currently a senior consultant working on iOS applications at Atomic Robot. She's helping to build a world that she wants to live in, one where women experience gender parity in tech. Vui does this through her advocacy as a lead for Women Who Code Colorado and Women Who Code Mobile, as well as by speaking at tech events, teaching workshops, and mentoring women developers on coding and technical speaking. When she's not coding, Vui enjoys fishing, eating, sleeping, and repeating. She also enjoys glamping and traveling to different places to go fishing. So with that, Vui, you want to get your slides up and let's get rolling.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily, for moderating my talk and for that introduction. And thank you so much, Christy, for your talk earlier. That was fantastic. All right. Okay, so Emily, everyone can see my screen?
We got it, yep.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. Today I will discuss how to steer your career on your terms with the right side project. My name is Vui Nguyen. I've been a software engineer for over 20 years. I currently am an iOS engineer. I've worked in many tech stacks over the years, and I've had a varied and interesting career made possible through side projects. Today I'll talk about what a side project is, why we want to undertake one, how to come up with the right side project, how to make it happen, and it's important to share your progress and success. I will demonstrate these concepts by walking through a side project I've done. And the takeaway point, remember this project is for you, so make it work for you. And I'll end with some final words of encouragement. Now, a side project is anything you do outside of your regular career that adds to your skill set or gets you closer to a career goal. Your career goal could be technical or leadership-based. If your employer can subsidize your project by paying for your time learning on the job, or maybe pay for an online class, that's certainly a bonus. But if that opportunity doesn't exist, I would encourage you to make your own. Side projects, however, are not unpaid internships or equity projects because of the possibility of exploitation. And remember that a side project has to work for you on your terms, otherwise you're working for free for someone else's benefit. Some examples of side projects are writing technical articles, building and publishing an app, running an event, volunteering for a nonprofit with meaning for you, preparing and giving a talk like what I'm doing right now, contributing to open source, or participating in a hackathon. Now, why would you want to work on a side project? So you may have heard before that you need to keep learning, but is it possible to have a career in tech and only learn on the job? Well, that answer depends on what you want. When I graduated with my computer science degree in 1999, cell phones were around, but the iPhone didn't come out until 2007. But I now work as an iOS engineer. So how did that happen, you ask? Well, the first programming language I learned in high school was called BASIC, and the programming language they taught everyone at my college was Fortran. My first job out of college was programming in C++ in a Unix environment at a defense contracting company. I've also pivoted to many different tech stacks over my career before I became a native iOS developer in Swift. And this was possible because I spent much of my career constantly learning through side projects. Now, it's possible I could have had a career without doing these side projects, but I feel like my career would not have been as rich or interesting for me if I hadn't done that and I continued doing the same thing for 20 years instead. So once you decide to work on a side project, the next step is figuring out what your project goals should be. So for me, iOS development is a big topic. So what area of iOS do I want to get better at? Or what problem do I want to solve? Now, Objective-C is the first programming language that came out for building iOS apps. Swift is a newer programming language for iOS, which came out about 6 years ago. Now, the problem is that there are still many legacy iOS apps written in Objective-C, and they need to be maintained. But rewriting all of them overnight to Swift is risky, but by not embracing Swift would mean that you start to fall behind technology trends and improvements. So I decided that my project goal is to build bridging architecture between old technologies and new technologies. And I will do this by building an app that demonstrates this bridging architecture and then publish that app to the market. And the bonus of getting my app published is that it can help me continue to find more iOS opportunities. Now, when you have a legacy Objective-C app, it is possible to write new Swift code in that app, but only if you are working on a completely new feature. Then you can write a completely new file in Swift. However, if you're modifying an existing feature, you can only do that by modifying an existing Objective-C file. As you can see from my slide, over time, the Objective-C file keeps getting bigger and bigger, and you are not introducing any new code in Swift. And by not modernizing your code base, you and your company app will start to fall behind the technology. But there is another way. So instead of adding to the Objective-C file and making it bigger and bigger, you can write something called a Swift class extension. It is an add-on to your Objective-C file, but it is written in Swift. Over time, your Swift extension will get bigger, but your Objective-C file will stay the same size. Eventually, you can rewrite both files into one Swift file when you have some downtime in your project. And by doing this code rewrite incrementally, you can modernize your code base while not putting your project at risk. So next, we need to determine topic and scope for your project. That will depend on what type of project you want to tackle. So here are some examples of topic and scope for a few different project types. If your side project is giving a technical talk, you may want to start by giving a lightning talk at a meetup, and then a conference, and then perhaps give longer talks on that same topic. If you want to build your leadership skills, one way to do that is to run an event. So you can start by taking responsibility for a small piece of that event, and then work your way up to being the main organizer for a future event. And what about topic and scope for building an app? I'll show you what I did with mine. So what kind of app do I want to build to illustrate the solution that I showed you from the previous slide? So to decide what kind of app I want to build, let's first talk about things that can increase complexity when building a mobile app, such as grabbing data from a server, having an app with many screens, creating your own content, or implementing full database operations, which are create, retrieve, update, and delete. So to simplify scope for my project, I decided that my app will only have 2 screens, there will be no interaction with an external server, and the content will come from my personal collection. So I will not be creating or fetching content. I'll show you what I mean in a little bit by my personal collection. So it turns out that the problem of modernizing legacy code, in this case, converting Objective-C to Swift, is complex and deep. But my solution, this bridging architecture that I'm going to build within my app, turns out to be simple and shallow. And here it is. It's my app that I built called Name That Pet. It is a pet name generating app. I will give you a quick demo of it. So this app will generate funny names for your pet. You can choose what type of title you would like your pet name to have. You can also choose to have a suffix or not. It also generates a random picture to go with your pet name. And if you don't like that picture, you can always select a different one. So that was the app I built. Excuse me, let me get back to my slides real quick. Okay, so I wrote this app in Objective-C with Swift class extensions. The code itself was not very long, but it shows this bridging architecture I talked about earlier. And I used pictures from my time volunteering at my local animal shelter, so I didn't have to create or find any new content. Also, before publishing to the App Store, I published the source code to GitHub to start. In fact, I regularly push commits to my GitHub projects instead of waiting until the project is done to do so. This makes my project and my progress public, which is a great way to share and be held accountable. And you can do the same. You don't have to publish your first app to the store right away. Let's talk a little bit about project management. If you're diving into a new topic, I recommend starting small. If you're going to build a bigger project, break up your one big goal into multiple smaller goals. Remember, you can always reduce scope and deliver something smaller first, because perfect is the enemy of done. And your career is a journey, so treat your project like one too. And also take breaks regularly so you don't waste time spinning your wheels. This will also make you a better developer, because it'll help prevent burnout. And you may want to look at some project management tools. So in the past, I've used Trello. I've also used project plans in GitHub. Here's a link. You'll have access to my slides at the end of my presentation. You may decide to follow a Kanban or Agile project management style, whatever works for you. What other project management tools are out there? Feel free to share with others in the chat. And it's important to make time for balance, because since time is a zero-sum game, you can't start a new project without giving up something else. And we all have different time management skills and priorities, so figure out what's important to you and what is less important and that you can say no to. For me, I manage everything by scheduling project time, and I also schedule separate family time, recreation, and free time. For example, once I'm done with this talk, I've set aside at least 2 months this summer where I won't be working on any new talks. I'll be wrapping up an iList talk that I started working on earlier this year. I'm going to see which conferences that I've submitted my talk proposal to see which ones have accepted my proposal, and then give that talk late in the summer or fall. But I will not be starting working on any new talks. And a support system to help you with your project is crucial as well. So do you have groups or meetups that you belong to that can help you with your project and keep you accountable? For example, I would recommend reaching out to your local chapter of Women Who Code or a technical track of Women Who Code that you belong to. For me, my Women Who Code mobile track was a huge support for my talk today. Sierra reviewed my talk proposal before I submitted it, and Navati reviewed the initial slides of my presentation and gave me valuable feedback. And if it's applicable to you, do you have a life partner? And do you have a family that you support with this person? Because your career is important not just for you, but also to supporting your family. So work with your family to make time for your project so that it will benefit all of you. For example, my husband has been really supportive of my projects and therefore my career. I used to attend in-person conferences before the pandemic for networking and career training. Sometimes I had to travel and be away from my family for a few days, which is really hard for my dog, who is very attached to me. But my husband understood that I was doing this to support us, even though it meant he had to do both his and my domestic duties while I was gone, because I was the one that usually cooked dinner for us, and he had to do both of our puppy duties. But I've worked at remote jobs for years, even before the pandemic. And every job I got in those before times, including the remote ones, I got in part because I made in-person contact through those conferences. So the sacrifices that my family made to support my career paid off. And I understand that I'm speaking from a position of privilege, because if you have human family members to care for, which I hear are more time consuming than fur babies, and especially if the family members you're caring for are very young or elderly or sick, or if you live in a culture where women disproportionately care for family, which I know is true in the US where I live, then getting that support you need to work on a project isn't always possible. So if you're not able to work on a side project right now, remember that this talk is recorded and you can rewatch this later when you're in a better position to do so. But for everyone else, I hope you can find a support system to help you with your project. Next, let's check in with yourself. Are you enjoying yourself? Are you making progress on your project? And if you're not making progress, get to a good stopping point, reduce scope and wrap up, and spend some time evaluating before you continue. I like to share a story about a former coworker I had that started his career as an iOS engineer, and he began working on building developer tools on the side, what one might call DevOps. And he seemed to really enjoy it, and he ended up pivoting from application development to back-end development. So the point is, you will always learn something from working on a side project, because even working on the wrong thing for a while can help you discover what you really want to do. But if everything checks out, I recommend sharing your progress, and when you meet your goals on social media, on update your website, your portfolio, whatever works for you. You can write a blog post about your lessons learned, for example. We have an active member of Women Who Code Mobile, Michaela, who posted screenshots of her app in progress to Twitter and Instagram before and when she published her app. And I think that may have helped her land her first job. For me, I shared the progress of my Name That Pet app weekly with my manager at the time, even though it was a side project, because I was lucky enough to have that kind of relationship with my manager. And here are the results of my project. At my last job, I was a project lead for several feature projects. I led my teams into modernizing the mostly Objective-C app legacy code via Swift extension files. We rewrote the Objective-C files entirely into Swift in between projects. Having my Name That Pet app in the App Store helped me land my previous job. And continuing to write Swift code helped me stay current with iOS technologies, which helped me land my current job at Atomic Robot. And as I mentioned before, Name That Pet is in the App Store. You can download it and try it out if you have an Apple device. The source code is on GitHub if you want to check it out to give you inspiration for your side project. And I want to end with some final encouragement. Remember, you always had it within you to fly. And when you do that amazing thing, like give that talk, write that article, publish the app, tell all your friends at Women Who Code, and I can't wait to hear about all your amazing side projects and accomplishments. Thank you for coming to my talk. My name is Nguyen. Please feel free to connect with me on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You can also find me on the Women Who Code mobile Slack. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Bowie. That was great. Sharing the link to your slides in the chat right now. Now, there was a lot of great content in there that people are anxious to get their hands on. One thing you said early on, const certainty equals change. I loved that. But thank you for also discussing the variety of side projects, that these aren't just pieces of code that we're writing, but other things definitely qualify as side projects and need that same level of scope, moderation, time for breaks, and all of the above. So thank you for that. I didn't see any questions come through in the chat, but we'll hang out for a minute or two to see if anything comes in. I know there was some conversation happening in the chats about people wanting to connect as a support system for working
Mhm.
on side projects.
That's fantastic. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Women in Code, we're here for you. Get involved in your local chapter in whatever technical track that resonates with your tech stack. We're here for you. So don't feel like you have to do it all by yourself.
Yeah. All right, I think we've got some coming in from Lisa. How do you know when your project is out of scope?
That's kind of a question that only you can answer because, I mean, you can determine the scope for your project. I would say that when you kind of get to a point where you're not making progress, or, you know, if your plan was, I'm going to publish this to the market or publish this to my website or whatever, and that was like 3 months ago, and you're not getting any closer to that, then it may be time to reduce scope and just put something out there that's a little bit smaller. Because if it's important to have that initial win, right? Because it's really good when you have like this huge, wonderful, fantastic project in your head, but if it never gets out in the world, then it doesn't benefit you, right? So if you've been working on the same thing for months and months and you're not getting it out there, then your scope is probably too big. But it's just going to feel really great once you have something out there, even if it's small, so you can start showing it to people, and then you can, you know, release something bigger after that.
All right, we had another question from Jeanette. How do you find ideas for a meaningful side project if you're still in the beginning of your if you're still working on developing your skills?
That's a great question. Like, I mean, you can certainly reach out to your network and ask for suggestions. For me, the projects I've worked on tend to reflect my hobbies or interests. I mean, you don't have to do that, but that's what I did, because it's easier to work on something if it's something interesting to you, right? So, like the Name That Pet app, I was volunteering at my local animal shelter, and it was just kind of fun to like revisit the pictures that I had and all just the fun times I had, you know, taking care of animals at the shelter. So I showed in one of the early pictures I love fishing. So another one of the apps I have in the market is a fishing journal app, which allows you to basically create a journal documenting your fishing trips, including pictures. So I did those things because it reflected what I was interested in. And I think if you do that, you'll be more interested in continuing it and finishing your project. And that's just my opinion, but other people may have other ideas.
Scanning through the chat, I think we have one that may be more directed at Christy from Cindy. So Christy, if you're still on the call, if you wouldn't mind responding in chat on that one. And then another question is, how do you find a partner for your side project, especially one that's not profit oriented?
That's a great question. One thing that I have in mind, I don't know if it applies to you, but like I know for mobile developers, a lot of mobile developers like myself are not designers. So maybe you might want to partner with a designer, and then that way you can like leverage both of your strengths. Yeah, I mean, I know I sound like a broken record, but like, you know, leverage your networks. You can always post something on social media, on LinkedIn or whatever, and say, hey, you know, I need a designer, or I need a partner who can help me. Hackathons are usually a great place to meet partners, because then if you work with someone on a hackathon project and then you might decide you like to work with them again on a personal project, then you can do that. So yeah, and just meeting people through meetups and events is also a good way to find potential partners. So I hope that helps.
Definitely. And with that, we're actually a minute over, so we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Christy and Vui. Great presentations. Slides have been shared. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily and Christy, and thank you everyone for coming to our talks.